Thank you. So the Learning the Ropes Advanced Call Changes scheme. So our launch today. So as you may have read in some of the publicity material, the inspiration for the scheme came from a survey of learning the ropes ringers and teachers, which showed that a major barrier to progress was the lack of reliable helpers and conductors to support the progression of new ringers into method ringing, especially where new bands were forming. The jump in some places was just too big. So from a personal love of call changes, the idea of the advanced call change scheme was born. Sometimes call changes are not truly recognised as a very useful and pleasurable stage of ringing, or as an area to focus on in their own right. So call changes can be viewed as a holding area for people who aren't ready to ring methods, but something that you put all the learners in together, something to fall back on if there aren't enough method ringers. And for some learners, the method ringing is viewed as the holy grail. And if they can't actually progress to ringing methods, they start to get feelings of failure. And often people are pushed too quickly into method ringing. Instead, now I think we should be thinking that the call changes stage, if you're going to stay at that stage, is a crucial time when people should be learning to listen and strike their bell. Ringing in the same place in each row gives you a chance to really identify which sound is your bell and analyse whether it's striking in the right place. Ringing in the same place in the row is actually quite difficult. It requires good bell handling and a consistency of rhythm. You have to take account of odd struckness, both of the bell you're ringing and the other bells in the tower. If that skill hasn't been learned before moving on to method ringing, then there's a high probability that striking will be poor. If you can't identify which bell sound is yours when you're ringing in the same place in the row, then how can you expect to strike accurately when you're putting your bell in a different place in the row each time? So I think much more can be done with call changes to improve listening and striking skills and the understanding of the theory. For instance, agreeing sequences beforehand can lead to fewer mistakes. Sequences can be learned in the same way that methods can be learned. Learning to call changes gives you a better understanding of them. So this scheme has been designed to fill that gap, and it will be especially useful to new bands. So it's a scheme of work to teach people to ring call changes in incremental steps in much the same way as we teach method ringing. And one of the main objectives is to broaden the capabilities of bands. All band members should be able to ring anywhere in the circle and call the call change sequences. And it's a scheme that will hopefully transfer some of the method ringing mindset to call changes, those pre-agreed sequences and the sequences that have to be learned. It's a parallel scheme to the original Learning the Ropes scheme. So there are 5 levels which increase in difficulty. Levels 1 and 2 are the same, so that's the bell handling level and the foundation skills level. But once we get to level 3, the pathways diverge. And once enrolled on either scheme, students can follow either or both pathways in sequence or in parallel. Not everybody has the resources available to them to progress to method ringing, so this is an ideal scheme to keep people interested and ensure that they continue to develop their skills. New and developing bands can work on this scheme together, and it's ideal for people to work on together. Teachers who are still developing their own method ringing skills and don't have the confidence to teach methods will find this scheme useful. And it's an ideal scheme for teachers who've taken that M2F module, the Rounds to Plain Hunt module. Inspiration for the higher levels of the scheme was taken from the Devon call change tradition, and in fact members of the Devon Association were involved with the development and piloting of the scheme. We looked at what is good about Devon ringing, that importance given to listening and striking, the predetermined sequences with incremental difficulty, and the obvious pleasure that people get in ringing the call changes. We also looked at what is different. The style of leading is definitely different. So in Devon, they ring with closed hand stroke leads, and most of the rest of us ring with open hand stroke leads. The speed of the ringing too. So probably as a consequence of the closed hand stroke leads, the speed of ringing in Devon is a lot faster. And they start from the bells down. So they'll ring the bells up, ring their call change sequence, and then ring the bells down again. So we did think it would be quite difficult to sort of to just sort of wholesale export Devon call changes into the rest of the ringing world. So we looked at what aspects are transferable to the wider ringing fraternity. So that importance given to listening and striking, but also the predetermined sequences that they ring and learn, which can be quite simple, but then increase in difficulty and complexity as you get more experienced. So what about those differences? Well, we don't want to be prescriptive about style. We think that it would make the scheme sort of unattractive if we were prescriptive. So we're encouraging people to continue to practice their local style of leading and the speed of ringing. So if you're ringing in Devon, we're not saying that you need to suddenly start having open hand stroke leads, and then we're not saying that everybody else needs to start having closed hand stroke leads. We're encouraging people to continue using their local calling convention. So if they call their bells down, we're not suggesting that everybody has to learn to call bells up, which is in the way that they do it in Devon. But we just see that would be a barrier to people perhaps embracing the scheme. Ringing up and down is important, and it is part of the scheme, but only in the same way as it's part of the original Learning the Ropes scheme. We're not suggesting that bands will raise and lower for every call change sequence. So many of the exercises need to be completed on a minimum of 4 different bells in the circle. This will improve bell handling skills, and it will also ensure consolidation at each level, as it actually takes quite a bit of time for people to complete each exercise, as they've got to tick it off on 4 different bells. There is equal emphasis put on learning to conduct call change sequences, in addition to being able to ring them anywhere in the circle. Each level has ringing targets, conducting targets, and theory targets. And achievement is measured by performance published on Bellboard. We're introducing some new skills. So jump call changes, we briefly alluded to these just before we started the presentation. There are 2 types of jump call changes. There's the ones that jump from one musical row to another on command. So for example, rounds to queens or rounds to titums, which is reasonably easy to achieve on 6 or 8 bells, but you do need to know your musical rows. And then there are the ones that, the calls that require individual bells to move more than one place. And on higher numbers, this can mean many places. This requires very good bell handling skills, and also requires good knowledge of the relative positions of all the bells in the row. And here come the Devon call change sequences. So these require learning. They're predetermined, so everyone ringing can and should know the sequences. And they're cyclic, so like methods, they come round at the end of the sequence. With the confidence gained from conducting throughout the scheme, there should be no barrier to people learning and calling even some of the longer Devon sequences. So I'm now going to show you a short video giving a taster of some of the exercises which may be new to you, or they may not be. Several of the clips were filmed with my own youngsters practice, and the others with some more experienced ringers. So are you ready for this? Switcheroo. Switcheroo. Well, you wouldn't believe how many times we actually had to film that jump call changes clip at St Martin's just to get that clip. So we ran a pilot scheme, which we ran between August and December 2021. 6 bands took part from across the country. Most of the bands were focusing on levels 2 and 3. Now mine are just about to start dipping their toes in the waters of level 4. Most of them were already using the original Learning the Ropes scheme, and the new scheme was welcomed as a good way to ease people back into ringing after the long layoff. Feedback suggested that the scheme was a welcome addition to regular teaching practices. And the band that I've been using the scheme with are all primary school age, and I can tell you they have really relished it. So we've got some feedback from the bands and feedback from some of the individuals. So Dee Smith, basically, if you don't really want to read all of this long piece of text, she says it was a solid base to refresh skills and build on previous taught skills. And it was a different approach to call changes for a band with previous experience, but it didn't feel like they were starting again. The theory was new to some, and conducting built up confidence. So with Jeanette Pardo's band, they were looking for an incentive to improve call change ringing, and the scheme provided that. And they will be using both schemes in the future. So Elliot's mum So these are my little ringers. Elliot, who's 10, really enjoyed the call changes scheme, the science of it and the empowerment that its accessibility to all ages brings. It's also been great for him being made to ring and call from different bells and given him a very full understanding of his place within the change, much more than I had learning the standard way. I love it. So Matt, who's 9, says, I love how many different sequences there are and how they all link together. It makes good patterns. I love being in charge of the ringing and everyone else having to do what I say, although sometimes they don't, even though I'm the youngest. And Lex, who's 11, says call changes are fun because you can call to tuneful rows or just completely randomly if you want to. I like that you can guess which change is coming next and start to see which order the bells are in. So it would not have been a very good idea to launch the scheme without any resources. So a dedicated toolbox is available on the ringingteachers.org website under resources/method toolboxes. And there's also access to the online learning portal from there. Personal progress logbooks. I like the fact that these are red. It's my favourite colour. So the personal progress logbooks are now available from the art shop. Art teachers will be able to register their learners on the scheme in the same way as they would for the original scheme. Certificates of achievement for all levels are available via Smart Ringer, are submitted for in exactly the same way as for the original scheme. There's an option to select either pathway when you click onto the level that you're submitting for. So just to end with, I would like to say a few thank yous. I'd like to say thank you to everybody here for giving up your time tonight to watch the presentation. I hope you will feel inspired as teachers or as bands to give the scheme a try. It's been a pleasure putting it together and great fun taking my own little band of youngsters through it, watching them grow in ability and confidence. We've already started some of the level 4 exercises, so roll on level 5 for us. I'd like to also thank the team of art volunteers who put together all of the resources. I certainly wouldn't have been able, we wouldn't be launching it now if we'd been relying on me to do all of that. I'd like to thank Leslie Boucher as well for support and guidance and encouragement and the occasional prod to get me going. And I'd like to thank the bands who helped with the pilot. Their feedback was invaluable for the scheme. And lastly, I'd like to thank Lex, Max and Elliot for their enthusiasm for embracing the scheme wholeheartedly.